Merry Christmas Eve to you, Scott Baker.
Mikey Ames, it is December 24th, 2025. Welcome to everybody. This is another edition of Lead Better, chance to talk about today's field note from Admired Leadership. It is field note 1658. And I'm not saying it's not a holiday version of a field note, but it's kind of grim. So yeah. The title is this: Recognizing Opinions That Come from Fear and Insecurity.
Yeah, so, I suppose there is a lot of hope.
That's our challenge for today.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, teasing out, what is fearful about any specific kind of rationale is a hopeful thing to do, right? So I suppose we could flip it by the time we're done with it to be full of hope.
I think we can. I think we can actually. And I think that the theme of the field note is leaders are always evaluating people's opinions as they're coming in the door. And sometimes the leader needs to look past what's being presented to why it's being presented. And I think that's the heart of this. Now, let's get to later the nature of fear, insecurity, when that's good, when that's bad. But in the heart of this is just the challenge to the leader to say, the reason you're being given may not be the reason why it's being offered. Now, I think whether that comes from fear, insecurity, greed, a competitive edge, desire to destroy the internal competition. Like there's all kinds of good or bad motives that could come with reasons why people would argue for a particular pathway.
Yeah, we could probably spend quite a long time writing 7 or 8 different field notes, depending on like how to tease out a specific motive that you might be seeing. And so in this particular one, when you're not sure as a leader if this is generated by fear, we've got a few flags that could be raised so that when it might be being based on fear and when it might not be. But now, your point is a great one, right? Because the higher a leader travels up the ladder, the more that they're going to have unsolicited feedback come their way about decisions that they should be making. And then, maybe this is why the trope about it being lonely at the top has been so prevalent, is because leaders oftentimes don't know what opinion to trust, right? Yeah. What opinion is actually coming from, organizational, best practice in mind, or, do you have an agenda? And you end up probably thinking, the higher you get up as a leader, that everybody's got an agenda. And that might be a difficult place to navigate from an interpersonal point of view if you feel like you're saying no to everyone's hidden agenda.
For sure. Now, you mentioned that there are some signs that the field note unpacks for leaders to be aware that might be a tell, and we'll get to those in just a second. But before we get there, let me posit an idea here that would set up why these things happen anyway, which is, well, first of all, there was a time when we wandered about in the wilderness, and as human beings, we were a little bit concerned that perhaps a lion might come out and devour us, or a snake might bite us. And so there is a built-in sort of let's be careful not to be destroyed mechanism inside all of us.
Right.
Now, you combine that with, and generally the world is a bit safer than that. Like we're not often encountering, I did encounter a very fat raccoon the other night. There's about 10 deer that come and hang out in my yard, but there's a raccoon right in the middle of it. And I was like, I think you're trouble. And so, but I don't ever feel like that raccoon was really going to come after me. Right?
But did you feel like your body responded even before your brain did? Almost like your fear of rabies was in your body.
Well, that always, yeah. And I think from the time we're kids, and I don't know if this is true everywhere in the world, but in North America, it's like, you're going to get rabies from a raccoon and you're going to have to get giant shots.
Right.
And you're like, okay. So my dog ran outside, chased the deer. And then I noticed that a raccoon scrambled up a tree. And I was like, oh, because that's unusual. Now it is weird just in general that like there are giant mammals wandering about on 4 legs in your front yard all the time. And you just be like, yeah, okay. So we got coyotes, there's turkeys, there's whatever. But my point being, There's the fear part. Now, here's the other part. This is written to leaders about dealing with fear and insecurity. Is that different than dealing with risk, right? Because in many organizations, many of the highest paid people are there for the intentional purpose of being fearful. They don't say that on the business card, right? They're in risk management, or they're to do strategic analysis. And part of the strategic analysis, people go and get, wildly expensive MBAs so that they can kind of come in and say, well, we've looked at this plan and there are, these are some of the upsides, but there are 7 different points here where we could be in bankruptcy by the end of the year. And we go, okay, thank you very much. And let's take a look at that. And we reward those people. Now, We've talked about some of those roles in other past field notes and how those people also need to have sort of a vision that's positive and optimistic in terms of where things are going. You can't just be in risk mode all the time. But you do know that is a big role, right? So it could be that the person bringing you their idea, their proposal, their analysis is actually doing their job. So my question to you is, how would you tell the difference between something that is legitimate risk analysis and something that is this person's own personal fear or insecurity?
Yeah, I think the specific things that we mention in the field note, I'm trying to apply them to someone who is in risk analysis, right? Because if the quant comes to me and starts talking in absolute statements, which we mentioned, is like like you've completely disqualified your ability to talk if you're not going to actually talk in probabilities. Because I've actually hired you, even though you might have the word risk in your title. I've hired you to actually speak to me in probabilities, not in absolutes.
Well, go ahead and run through the kind of the 3 main categories here for us. The language cues of risk, of fear and insecurity.
Right. And I like the fact that these are broken down into language cues, because it becomes very behavioral for us to recognize that you're not interpreting somebody's mindset here, or even trying to. You're looking for language cues. And so the first one we mentioned, like if we have this absolutist language that creeps up, so words like always and never, good or bad, we actually will run into this outcome, right? Tell me it's at 82%. Don't tell me that it's any kind of absolute word. Another sign is preoccupation with image and status. And then another one is emphasis on rules and process and procedures is a telltale sign that the opinion is probably coming from fear. Now, I live across the street from a guy who was, all about compliance, right? His whole career in a tech company was being a compliance manager.
Right,
and
exactly.
You can tell the way he lives his life that he's all about compliance, right? And so does he come across and like measure the height of your grass? Yes. And he happens to live right next to the neighborhood pool as well, which is the worst place in the neighborhood
to have the compliance officer.
Right. Exactly. And so when rules don't exist around the pool, he has a tendency to kind of make things up as well.
Yeah.
But either way, that's a good thing in the fact that I don't think he wants control. I don't think he wants fear to be the main driving thing, but it manifests.
Yeah, but people who want control, the control is sort of driven by the fact that when there is not control or there's uncertainty, then their fear mechanism rises.
Yes. So my guess is that if you have someone who doesn't usually reference rules and process and procedures, and then all of a sudden they become the rules police, like they're really telling you we can't do that because of this rule, then they're fearful of something. That's the indicator right there.
All right. So in those 3, looking at them, so absolutist language is kind of the interesting first one, where people will be like, this will definitely happen, or we should never be doing that. You can imagine certain ways where that language could be helpful, right? You could imagine somebody saying, I thought we as an organization stand for this value, and that we were to never, go down a pathway where we're violating the founding principles of the company. That's a never, but it might not be in the same way of a risk prediction or something where it's saying, this particular decision is definitely going to be this or this. You need to do it my way. This is the only way that'll work. And so absolutist language, certainly could be a tell. And I think the easiest one here to understand is the idea of image and status. How will people read this? What will be our reputation in the industry? How will regulators look at us? All of those things. And so that person might be protect. It's the cover your ass sort of syndrome to say, right. All right, we want to keep our image more than anything. That's the important value. Now, the last one and the emphasis on rules and process and procedure is the thing that drives many people crazy, including people in neighborhoods with certain kinds of neighbors. But that one also can be the thing that kind of keeps people within the boundaries of what makes an effective organization. So again, there's not always a clear line to say when somebody says, "Hey, isn't this the way that we do things around here? Right? Isn't this our policy?" That if you're going to violate a policy, you should have a pretty darn good reason, right?
Yes. So we should say that we're not talking about illegal things. I know that that's understood, and anyone who's been listening to us for long enough know that we're not trying to create room to do illegal things. But you could read these three things and be like, oh, you're just creating a loophole for yourself to, talk yourself into doing something illegal. But but no, like if your fear is getting arrested, then don't do it.
Yeah. Now, we get past those initial three. There's some additional thoughts here that aren't quite as specific, but are also helpful. So there's the idea that when you're reading a sense of high anxiety, low openness to other ideas or other avenues, if there's a defensiveness around this, like if I push back on your concerns, I think if you were in a good organization, I've actually worked with some of these kinds of teams in big organizations where they're hired to be very critical of policies and procedures. But if you said, well, I'm not sure about this, they would be, well, let's take a look at that. Like, I don't think that they would be like, no, my analysis is the only way. Like that would be a bad sign for that person. So I think that's a helpful thing to say, when am I reading anxiety? Because the person that's doing a reasonable job of pointing out risk is not going to have the high anxiety unless they actually see disaster.
Right. So what this encourages us all as leaders to do is to constantly probe and push back on opinions, right? So you do want to know, is this fear that you're articulating in one of these three methods actually founded on something else? Or is this a legitimate thing that I need to actually be? And so if the compliance officer across the street just is making up rules for the community pool for some reason, then, the best thing for me to understand where that motive is coming from, like, is he afraid of something or does he want control? I'm not even going to be able to understand that unless I ask him 2 or 3 or 4 questions to get to, like, what is it that you're actually trying to do? Right.
Right.
And so if we don't do that in our organizations all the time, it's going to feel a little bit like defensiveness is. I can imagine the person who is afraid of losing their job because maybe they think if we go through with this thing and it fails, I'll be the first one laid off because of this failure. I can just see it in the numbers that my department will be the first one cut if this pet doesn't make it. So therefore, I'm just going to say, I don't want to do it because I don't want that exposure.
Yes,
so if that's the case, then as a leader, I need to understand where that fear is coming from because number one, I probably need that person on board in order for the decision being enacted to be something that it actually, I've got subscription from him and he actually makes the decision work for the organization. So it's not like this, you can just ignore the fear. Once you know that, oh, it's fear-based, you can walk away from it and be satisfied with it. You need to keep asking questions to understand why the fear, and then how do I gain subscription after that? It's important.
Right. Well, one of the things that we know eternally is that things that we are fearful about that remain undefined, or they are kind of the monster under the bed or under the rug, if you ignore those things or you push them aside, they tend to get bigger. When you actually lean in, a person could present this and you'd be like, well, let's unpack it. Let's look at this. This could happen. This could happen. Let's get more specific and precise. And when you're very precise around these things, then the fear might dissipate delegate because now you have a clearer picture of the reality, good, bad, or neutral, right? Now, then the leader's role is, how do we move this in the direction that we need to go, right? Because there has to be a positive and aggressive drive toward the thing you're trying to accomplish. And that's why the counter side to this is people that are generally are the risk managers or the lawyers or the people that kind of pick out all of these dangers. They tend to not be the people right at the top of the organization because they will just get themselves into this, like, well, this could happen, and well, that could be a problem, and let's overanalyze this thing, right? So you kind of need a balance of people in an organization. And I think it's a good thing for a leader to be mindful of who they are, who the other people are, and they can sort through this to find real wisdom and then bring just good judgment to bear.
Right. Great place to end.
Dynamite.
All right. I don't know if we'll actually talk on Christmas Day. We might.
Yeah. We'll have one. In fact, tomorrow's field note just came in the door.
Oh, sure it did. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll take a look at that, and then we'll see how we'll get something out there, because we haven't missed a day since we've been doing these live in Substack, and we've done them pretty consistently for a couple of years now,
right.
in other formats. So and Fridays is already in too. I already have Thursdays and Fridays filled out.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Okay, great, good to see you. We'll talk then.